Okay. Done, does that mean taught and been taught? Okay. So how many have taught that lesson?
Is that the one sitting scales?
Sit to, yes.
You taught that to me.
Great. So two, kind of. Okay. Of those of you, others, did you read and do?
Yes.
Did anyone not read and do?
The first one?
Yes. Recorded and did? Or did it in some way other than read? I know there's two. You haven't done it at all. Okay. So when you, those of you who did it, you read it and did it. So it was read, do, read, do.
I did and visualized.
Yeah? Huh? Okay. Did and read and visualized.
I think that's what I did.
No, we didn't do it.
But we couldn't do it. Two scales.
Okay, good. I just needed to get an idea whether we'll actually include that lesson next week or do another one. I mean, if you've done it 5 times already, we probably wouldn't, but it looks like we might. Too many people are talking at once. Sorry.
I said I didn't have the 2 scales, so
No.
was that part.
But you can imagine 2 scales and get a pretty clear idea.
Yeah. And in the past I had to have done it with clients, but not in the Calvin Price one.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you. Do I have another question? These are the essential, you know, when you got the shopping list and you forget at the last minute. Wait. No, something else.
I thought you were imagining it.
I'll try that one, then I don't need a pen. Madhava thought I was imagining my shopping list. That's great. My imagination's pretty good, but my memory's not so. Well, it is in some regards. Okay. Please lie on your back.
I've been imagining since morning, since the call started, I thought.
Yeah. It's very good. You've planted a seed for me, Madhavi, that I no longer need my hand notebook and a pen. That begin to listen to how you settle, how you land on the floor, how you settle on the floor, how you land in yourself, when you settle in yourself. Just take a moment to check in with yourself. Find out what state you're in right now. So it's quite curious that people can ask you perhaps what you've been doing, and when you try to explain it and you say, well, we lie on the floor a lot and we roll around a lot. And our dear analytical minds can think, well, we're not really doing very much. So why am I so tired? Or where's my brain gone? Or those sort of questions. And it's huge. Do you know how much the day babies sleep? Not all, but many. When they're so active and they're learning about the world and themselves and in their sensory experience. All things given, they sleep a lot. As a generalization. I know you may be the one exception if you're a mother who had a baby that didn't, that had difficulty, but so it's really common to start to feel tired at the end of a week or before, or into the middle of the second week. And then the question is, how do we adapt to that? What can we do? One thing that can be useful is just to accept where you are and not struggle to think that you have to do the whole ATM or get something, that you'll miss out on something if you don't do it. The process is very much about immersing yourself in your learning, and as part of that, a big part of that, is beginning to recognize, what do you need now? And is there a priority of needs? And beginning to make distinctions about what would be most comfortable for us in a particular moment. So I'm going to suggest to you again that you rest as often as you need to. And that you just, wherever you are right now, it's okay to be that way. You've done a lot of stirring the pot and changing the firing in your brain this week. And that emerges in different ways in our thinking and our sensing and our feeling and our acting. And because we're all unique individuals, it presents in different ways at different times. And all the experiences you are having will assist you in the future, whether you know it or not, when you begin to teach others. So please scan your contact with the floor. This time you may have had or come across this particular way of scanning before. You can think of the line of your spine as being the central line. You can think of the lines of your two legs, your right leg and your left leg, that have a certain direction and a certain length, and that connect somewhere with that midline, central line of your spine. And then there's the two lines of your arms that connect through your shoulder girdle, as you were discovering in this morning's ATM more and more, to your spine. And then you could imagine that you've got a ball on top of the line of your spine, or a circle that represents your head. And so at its simplest, most basic level, you have a childlike drawing of a human being. And our nervous system relates to the organization of our skeletal structure in some ways like we're five lines. And yes, those lines can be bent and they can be turned and they can occupy space and move away from our center or towards our center. That's another way of thinking of ourselves and integrating over time into our self-image. So please bring your arms overhead on the floor, somewhere where your arms can make contact with the floor. So you feel, if it's possible, your elbows are on the floor. If it's comfortable for you, your legs are long. So you could begin to imagine there's a piece of string that goes from your right hand along your right arm, across the center of your body to your left hip joint, down your left leg to your foot. Could you make that more of a diagonal line so that the line of the leg is getting closer to being an extension of the line of your arm? Then imagine the same from your left hand to your right foot. So you've got two lines, right hand to left foot, left hand to right foot. Where do your lines cross? You feel that one line crosses the center line, midline of your spine, higher or lower than the other line? Sense the contact of each of those diagonal lines with the floor. What about the volume? If you think about the volume of yourself through those lines, the direction of length of your right leg across your torso to your left shoulder and to your hand, and from your left heel up through into your left hip joint to the diagonal shoulder along the length of your right arm. It's one diagonal clearer for you than the other. Scan the contact along the length of your two diagonals. And then please roll over and lie on your stomach. Can you lie in an X on your stomach? And how do you sense your 5 lines here? I have the same sense of clarity? Or is it a little different? In which way, or how have you chosen to organize your head? You turned your head to the right or the left. So turn your head and place it one direction. Usually the direction you turn your head in first will be the most comfortable, because our kinesthetic sense will direct our intention. If we don't think about it, we will do what is more comfortable. Now, that comfort doesn't mean necessarily intelligent or the most efficient. It's usually the easiest, the simplest, the most habitual action that we know. Sense the space between your arms. the space between your legs. And in your imagination, so thinking, not doing, imagine that you're going to begin to lighten the arm of the side you are facing. So if your head is turned to the left, you'll be thinking of lifting the left arm. If your head is turned to the right, you'll be imagining lifting the right arm. So how would it be in your imagination? Can you imagine that your arm begins to lengthen a little bit before you lift it? And then does it return to the original position in your imagination? How do you breathe as you imagine this? Are you relieved that you're only imagining it? I mean, in your imagination, it's possible to lift your arm very high. But where would your weight need to go? How would you mobilize yourself if you were to lift your arm a little bit? The arm that your nose is turned towards. Now imagine that you're lifting the diagonally opposite leg. That your leg lengthens a little bit before you even begin to lift it. And observe as you're imagining, do you sense the mobilization of yourself? Does the very thought mobilize and give you a sense of something beginning to happen? So you're not wanting to lift your leg, you're imagining lifting it. In your imagination, is it easier to lift your leg? The leg of the side away from that which you are facing. Now begin to do the smallest movement of lifting, beginning to lift that leg of that diagonal. So we're going to work with the same diagonal. It's the arm of this arm that your head is on the side that your head is turned towards, and the leg on the opposite diagonal, connected on that diagonal. So think of your leg, sense your leg. Begin to lengthen your leg a tiny bit, but don't break the contact of your leg with the floor. So it's the smallest, tiniest movement, mobilization of yourself in that direction. And you try it out, and then you let it go, pause a moment, and try again. Listening as you begin to mobilize yourself to move ever so gradually from imagining toward lightening or unweighting your leg. What happens through the rest of yourself? There's some other part of yourself that begins to press into the floor. And when does that happen? Does that happen before you feel your leg getting a little lighter on the floor, or after? Or maybe you notice it after, but it actually happens before. So you're listening to that, the very beginning of the mobilization, the initiation of the intention to lighten your leg on the floor. And with the idea of lengthening it a little bit before you lift. It's not about bending the knee or lifting the lower leg. If you were to unweight the leg, your thigh would unweight at the same moment. Not break contact, but just lighten a little bit. And what do you notice happening in the shoulder along that diagonal as you begin to mobilize yourself to lift your leg? Does it change its relationship to the ground, to the floor? Anything happen in your shoulder blade? Okay, rest a moment. And remember, you can rest as often as you like. You can change position if you like. You know, so often we put restrictions on ourselves without necessarily questioning them. So it's really great that some of you are taking the opportunity to check in and say, is it okay? Because sometimes we need to hear the same thing in many different ways before we know and trust it's okay. Especially if it's a very different way of learning, being, in a learning environment than we've experienced before. It's hard to trust. It's hard to trust ourselves, or it's difficult to trust that it is okay. And that's actually a vital part of learning. How we pause, how we come back afresh. So return to the same X position, head turned in the same way. Don't do anything, just begin to think about lifting, lightening, lessening the weight of the arm on the same diagonal, which will be in front of your face. And then let go that. Feel how you give up the work, and then try it again. Imagine that your arm is lengthening ever so slightly, that you might feel your hand creeping on the floor, and your arm unbending a little bit, if it's a little bent, before you begin to lighten it. Keeping your arm in contact with the floor, but starting to reduce the pressure. Listening to what mobilizes through yourself. Where do you start to press the floor? You press the floor on more on your left side of your torso somewhere, or the right side? When you think of lifting your arm, which part do you think of lifting first? Is it the hand, your elbow, your shoulder? While you do that, do you sense anything happening in the diagonally opposite buttock or thigh? please leave that. Roll over onto your back and rest. Is it starting to get any easier to attend to yourself in that moment of rest between exploring, and observe if anything's changed in the way you're relating to the ground? Please return to roll over and lie on your stomach again, same way. Spread in that X-like position. Head turned to the same side. And begin to lift, to lighten the arm of the side you're turned towards. And then, again, you let the weight settle to the ground. And then try that with your leg, same diagonal. Release slowly. So that it's not a propulsion to leave the ground, but it's a slow organization that helps you recognize what happens through the length of your back in order to lift your arm or lift the diagonally opposite leg. You can go slow enough and begin to free the weight of your arm from the floor a bit. So lift once your arm, just enough so you could slide a piece of paper out from underneath it. Feeling what happens through yourself as you do that. Notice if you're beginning to feel your arm creep on the floor, to lengthen a little bit. And then bring the weight back down. And do the same thing with your leg. So it's always the same diagonal. Think of lengthening your leg, mobilizing yourself, and you're just wanting to clear the floor just enough that I could slide a piece of paper out from underneath your thigh. Observing what happens in the shoulder of that diagonal. What happens in relationship with the front of you and the floor? Where do you press the ground? Where do you lean? Where does your weight shift to? Where, as you begin to lift your arm and break the contact of the floor and then lower it again, how does your weight redistribute? And then lengthening and lifting your leg. Okay. Do you feel your arm wanting to lift when you lift and lengthen your leg? Or when you or vice versa, when you lift and lengthen your arm, or lengthen your arm as you begin to lift, you feel your leg beginning to lighten on the floor? Rest for a moment on your stomach, but turn your head to the other side or face down, and just notice. Was that good timing, the rest for you? Or could it have been sooner? I know for myself that some days if I've been working in the garden and picking and pruning and sawing down trees, and my arms don't like to stay in this position as long, and I have to get used to accommodate it again. And then in other times, it doesn't feel like anything to keep my arms in this X position. So please come back to your X, head in the same direction. Could you begin to lengthen? So not so much focus on the lifting, but lengthen the arm and the leg on the same diagonal. So same arm, same leg you've been using, but you're just thinking of distancing your hand from your foot, your elbow from your knee, your shoulder from your hip. And then pausing, giving it up, feeling the ground again, feeling yourself return to stillness. And do that several times. Feel what's happening with your head. There's a lengthening of this diagonal and the first approximation towards lifting. Does it change the weight of your head on the floor? Does your head tend to roll a little bit or slide? Or do you pick it up? So as you feel it gets more possible, could you begin to have this idea of lengthening, of distancing your hand from your heel and beginning to reduce the pressure of that diagonal on the floor so you unweight your leg and unweight your arm and then let their weight return to the floor again. Being mindful of lengthening, whether your arm or leg leaves the floor first, and what happens through the middle of you. Does your weight shift more in the direction of the side of the legs that's lifting, or more in the direction of the side the arms that's lifting? Several times try lifting your head as well. So you're not thinking high, you're thinking of the distancing, the lengthening and distancing between your hand and foot on the same diagonal. Feeling what presses toward the floor as you think of lifting and lengthening. And what are you doing with your breathing? Does it make any difference if you breathe in or you breathe out? What's happening with your other leg? There's a moment there where I saw 2 feet in the air. So it's just the one leg, one arm on the diagonal. And rest a moment. You can rest on your stomach, you can roll to your side, half on your side, onto your back. And please return onto your stomach again. Same X. Well, it's a different X because you've had a rest, so it's a different you. This time, gradually lift the same diagonal. Lengthen and lift your arm and leg. And then keep them lifted. Lift your head if it's easier. Keep them lifted. And then find a way to lower your arm as you lift your leg a little higher. And then as you lower your leg, your arm lifts a little higher. So you can imagine you've got a string between your hand and your heel. And first of all, you're making this long bow shape where the string is over the back of you and the front of you is the curve of the bow. Maybe your belly button would be where the arrow would go if it was archery. And then keeping that bow-like shape, you're beginning to rock yourself a little bit or roll on the front of you so that as your arm lowers downwards towards the floor, your leg will lift a little higher. As your leg lowers down towards the floor, your arm lifts a little higher. So you're rolling across your torso in a diagonal kind of way. So you can breathe. Feel where the line of pressure is over your abdomen. Rest when you need to. So in order to rock like that, one, it requires an organization through the length of our back, which if your lower back musculature is very active, can feel very tiring or difficult. So acknowledge where you are and what's happening for you. And keep on exploring the size of the movement. It feels easy. The range of your rolling. But you're honing in on the intention of shifting the weight diagonally across the front of yourself in such a way that you can raise your arm while your leg lowers and raise your leg while your arm lowers. Okay, rest a moment on your stomach in the X. Because just before we roll over, see what it's like now. So you've just to lift the arm of that side, the arm of the diagonal you've been working. Has it got any lighter? Let your arm stay on the ground, lift your leg. Has that got any lighter? Do you feel any more clarity about what presses in order to help you lift your leg, or what way you press into the ground in order to lift your arm? Keep your head turned the same way and try lifting the diagonal arm and leg. Just notice what that's like, the other diagonal. Does it feel harder or easier? Okay, that's enough. And rest. Roll over onto your back. Sense your contact with the floor. The 5 lines, a circle on top. Scan the contact of your 5 lines with the floor. Line of your legs. There's 2 lines for representing the legs. 1 line, central line, representing the line of your spine. And a little circle head. Slowly roll yourself to one side and bring yourself up to standing. Gets easier the next bit for you. But even if it's difficult, it's valuable to do in your imagination, especially the lengthening part. So as you come up to standing, notice what you notice. Contact of the leg you've been working with the floor, your sense of that diagonal. Begin to walk around. And notice as you're in your walking, do you have any sense of that diagonal in any way? You're more aware of the diagonal you've been working with or the other one? Okay, we'll just take a 5-minute break and come back and do some more ATM.